Welcome back. It's time for Viewpoint now, and today we delve into South Korea's efforts to promote nuclear energy both here at home and abroad. For more on that, I have Professor JERNG DONG-WOOK from CHUNG-ANG University. Professor Chung, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me here. Okay.
I also have Zeon Lights, founder of Emergency Reactor, live on the line in the UK. Zeon, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll start here then. Professor Chung, let's start then with a few words on the impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on Europe's energy supplies.
Yep. Well, as you can see in the news coverage about the Russia and Ukraine war, it triggers the issues of energy security in nearly 50 years. Back in 1970s, I think there was oil crisis due to the conflict in the Middle East area, and after that, the energy supply in the world was almost has been stable. But in this time, the war between the Russia and Ukraine, it caused a concern about the gas supply, so that energy security becomes top issues in the energy policy these days. Yep.
Right, and against that backdrop, Zeon, nuclear power is gaining greater support in Europe as Europe itself seeks to have independence from Russian supplies. Now, that being said, in terms of total electricity production over there in the UK, how much does nuclear power account for, and what is the public perception with regard to nuclear power there in the UK?
In the UK, we obtain 17% of our electricity from nuclear energy, so it's not a lot. We rely very heavily on fossil fuel imports, and indeed we are starting to worry about energy security because of the invasion of Ukraine. The perception of nuclear here is very positive now. Well over half of the population support nuclear energy, but that's actually changed quite a lot in the last 2 years. The tide has shifted. This is partly due to rising electricity prices that people are just really struggling to afford to pay their bills, and also because of the Russian invasion. And even in Germany now, 2/3 of people support nuclear energy. So it's happening across Europe, this shift.
Right, I see. Professor Chung, in Spain last week, President Yoon Suk-yeol sought to actively promote South Korea's nuclear energy technology to his counterparts from Poland and the Czech Republic, just to mention a few. How do you assess these efforts?
Well, if you look at the nuclear market in the world, it's something like the World Cup game. What I mean is that it's not a competition among the private companies. It's something like the competition among the countries. Okay, if you look at the news media, how they broadcast the nuclear deals, then it's almost a top news. So that the something like the World Cup game, as I said. And looking at the nuclear market, in these days, the suppliers are only 5 countries. Korea and U.S. and France. That's the Western world, and the other part is Russia and China. Only 5 countries that they can, supply the, a nuclear power plant. So that it's a country-to-country game. So that it's kind of the present business. So that it's quite natural. Even for the U.S. and France, president they come up to negotiate or sell the nuclear power plant. So that his active, role in the, nuclear market deals is quite natural, And, the countries like the Czech and Poland and Netherlands, even Netherlands, as I said, only 3 countries in the Western world. So that it's quite natural for them to have interest in our, capability to supply the nuclear power plant. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And Zeon, speaking within your capacity as a scholar then, what can you share with us about the perception that in Europe or in the UK with regard to South Korea's nuclear energy venture and perhaps its capacity?
My understanding is that the last government that you had wanted to phase out nuclear. So it was really big news here when your government changed and we found that you had a pro-nuclear candidate instead. I also saw a report that said that phasing out nuclear would increase electricity costs there by 5 times. So this is really in our news now. We're very much paying attention to it because everybody is worried about soaring electricity prices and wondering what are other countries doing? And we're looking at places like South Korea and your plans to build 4 new reactors by 2030. We're also looking at places like France, where they've had a lot of nuclear reactors for a long time and they're now building more. But yeah, I've seen very positive reporting about it here, especially on how quickly you're aiming to build them, because it does take a long time here. So I think a lot of people are interested in, what's happening over there that's making it a lot more efficient than in the UK to build these nuclear power plants.
Right. And Professor Chung, I understand there have been remarkable advances on nuclear power technologies, and small modular reactors are the latest innovation. That being said, could you tell us a bit more about them?
Well, let me tell you a little bit about more about the our capacity about the nuclear power plant as a supplier. As I said, looking at the suppliers, we have only 3 countries in Western world, France and the US and Korea. And among 3 countries, the only suppliers who meet the schedule and the budget boundary is Korea, is the only one. Okay, looking at the France and the US and their record of construction is quite cannot be comparable with us. So that's the if UK is concerned about the schedule and the cost, then you should look at the Korean nuclear industry. Okay, that's one thing that I like to say. And SMRs, the market for the SMR has not been open yet. Still we are waiting, but it comes very close to us. For example, the first runner of SMR is the US company, NuScale. They say that they're gonna build and connect the grid before the end of this decade. So within next 5 or 6 years, they are planning to build and complete the first unit. So it's very close. And even in UK, the Rolls-Royce, that's the company which leads the SMR development in the UK. They already announced that they're gonna get into the process to select the factory to manufacture and build the SMR. And originally, the UK Rolls-Royce, they said they're gonna build the first SMR in the middle of the 2030s. But they recently announced that they're going to try to build the first SMR in the UK before the end of this decade too. So it's very close to us. And even in Korea, we will launch a new project, a development project to build more economic and the safer SMR, within this decade too, for the technology advancement in SMRs. Yep.
Right.
So many countries that they are looking at the SMRs, and the competition is very fierce. The competition is very fierce, and we will see who's going to be the winner. Yeah.
Right, I see. And Zion, some say these small nuclear reactors may create 30 times more radioactive waste. What do you say?
We always hear these nonsense claims about waste. I have heard this claim before. It ignores many factors, including the fact that most waste can be recycled. France, Germany, Belgium, Switzerland already recycle their nuclear waste, and there's absolutely no evidence that SMRs would create more waste. I think people really need to focus on the fact that even if there was 30 times more, the waste from nuclear, or spent fuel as we call it, is very well managed, and it's never harmed anyone, whereas fossil fuel waste is stored in the Earth's atmosphere and it's causing climate change and also many deaths from air pollution. So we should also keep that in perspective.
Right, I see. And Professor Jung, beyond technology then, here in South Korea, there remains public concern though about the safety of nuclear power plants. How do you respond to these concerns?
All right, now let me answer to your questions. I'd like to correct your question about the radioactive waste.
Are we talking about the small modular reactors first? All right.
The amount of radioactive waste from the SMR is exactly the same as the large reactors because they are based on the same technologies. So that no more waste is generating from SMRs at all. The amount is the same, but the radioactive waste still, it's making the radioactive waste, and we have to dispose it safely. The fourth generation reactors, it has a capability to reduce the radioactive waste, but it takes a little more time to make it deployed in the electricity market. But I like to correct that the SMR, the amount of radioactive waste is the same as the large reactors. No more radioactive waste at all.
Right, I see. Thank you for clarifying that.
All right, and then let me get back to your question about the safeties. The safety of a nuclear power plant. Everybody, most of the people has a trauma about the safety of a nuclear power plant because of the Chernobyl and the Fukushima accidents like that. But let me say this one. Rather than explaining about the scientifically, the scientific basis about the safety of nuclear power plant, I'd like to talk about the taxonomy, European taxonomy. When they decide to include, the nuclear energy in the taxonomy, the first thing that they look at was the safety of a nuclear power plant, and the conclusion that they found was that the safety concern, the danger of a nuclear power plant is no more significant compared with the other energy sources. All the energy sources, they have some dangers and some bad effect on the environment. And compared with them, nuclear power, we cannot say that it is more dangerous or the more harmful, things like that. So that's the conclusion which made European communities to decide to include the nuclear energy in the taxonomy. And today, they're going to make a vote. Tonight, they're going to make, in Korean time, they're going to make the a vote on the whether they're going to accept European Council's proposal to accept nuclear as the environmentally friendly energy or not. So I'd like to ask my European partner whether what's your expectation about that vote? You expect that it will be accepted?
Right.
Or
Actually, let's stay with that. Right. Then Zeon, staying with what Professor Chung has just said, could you shed some light on the ongoing dispute over the European Commission's proposal to classify gas and nuclear power plants as green in the EU's taxonomy, which I understand refers to a list of investments that can be marketed as sustainable, as mentioned by Professor Chung?
That's correct. And it's actually really important what happens with the taxonomy because it determines what gets funded. So you've got all these countries trying to meet their net zero goals, and we want them to be able to easily fund nuclear energy. And if it's not included in the taxonomy, then it's just not going to be as easy for them to move forward with that. So it's really important. But there's a problem, which is that nuclear and gas have been lumped together, and there's a single vote on that. So obviously, these are two very different sources of energy. Gas, we should be phasing out. That's what the science shows. We should be relying less on that, and we should be building more clean energy like renewables and nuclear. But because they've been lumped together, the vote is either do you want gas and nuclear or do you not want gas and nuclear. This is very problematic because they're two very, very different types of energy. Gas is very polluting and nuclear is very clean and has a small land footprint. So what's happening is that actually a lot of the green groups have lobbied very heavily to include gas in there because they want it as a transition fuel. And a lot of the kind of environmental groups in Europe are very against nuclear power. This has been just a traditional thing going right back to the 1960s and 70s, where they've been lobbying against it very heavily. So they're continuing that lobbying, and especially groups like Greenpeace and the Green parties over here, very, very strong lobbyists against nuclear. So that has been happening for some time, and everybody's watching and waiting now to see what will happen. I'm hoping that they do get included. I think that they will get included, but I think there will be lots of, small print to prevent nuclear from being built easily. So it's likely that, there will be restrictions, that it will be passed, but there will be restrictions. But it's a real shame that gas will also be given the go-ahead if nuclear is. I really don't think those two things should have been confused.
Right, I see. Professor Jung, back here in South Korea, on Tuesday, the Union administration unveiled its energy policy direction. Now, what are some of the plans that caught your attention?
Well, actually, what they announced in Tuesday, the energy policy directions in the new government, I didn't find any something new. But because the energy policy directions of the Yoon Suk-yeol's government was already set up during the presidential race last year. They already set up the direction of the energy policy, and what they announced in the Tuesday was just a confirming process to implement the presidential race pledge into the government official policy. So that what I found is that all the pledges that he made was implemented in the official government policy. So nothing was new to me. But what I expect to see is that a government plan for electricity demand and supply. Every 2 years, government should set up a plan to how to supply the necessary electricity. And in that plan, they have to set up the energy mix. They set up the energy mix up to the year 2038, 15 years, time of frame, so that if you look at that, that plan, then you will see the details of the how many new nuclear power plants will be introduced, and what's going to be the portion of renewable energies, things like that. So we have to look at that, a specific plan. Before that, the direction, only looking at the direction, it's what they already said. So that I'm waiting to see the basic electricity supply and demand plan. That will show the details. Yeah.
Right. Zeon, ultimately, energy alternatives then like nuclear power seek a path to zero carbon emissions, which some believe can be achieved in the absence of nuclear power. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that people can believe whatever they like, but the science tells us very clearly that we need nuclear to decarbonise. The scientific consensus is that we need a combination of nuclear energy and renewables to hit net zero targets. There is no large electricity grid in the world that has been able to reach zero carbon emissions without nuclear energy and without some renewables. Now, this is to do with baseload power, where you can build lots of wind turbines and solar panels, but when it's not sunny or windy, especially somewhere like, in the UK, it's not very sunny for a lot of the year, then you need a backup capacity, and that is the baseload power, which is nuclear power. So at the moment, it's fossil fuels or it's nuclear power, and we heavily rely on fossil fuels, so we need to replace that with nuclear energy. And when I say that there's a scientific consensus that shows that we need nuclear energy to decarbonise, that consensus is very, strongly evidence-based. It comes from reports like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That's the IPCC that create the reports that show us that climate change is happening and that we need to deal with it. Those same reports say that we need to build lots of nuclear, something like twice the amount that we're aiming for at the moment, to meet our net zero targets. And the United Nations has also produced a report saying we need nuclear to decarbonise, and so has the International Energy Agency. These are really important scientific bodies that we should not ignore. Just as they're saying that we need to take action on emissions, they are helping to tell us what the solutions are, and nuclear has always been one of the biggest solutions, and we absolutely need to make sure that we follow the science on that.
Right, and talking about science, Professor Chung, South Korea has pledged to mark a significant drop in carbon emissions by the year 2030 and then go for zero carbon emissions by the year 2050. How feasible is this plan?
Well, very difficult. It's not that easy. It's not that easy at all. But because the Yoon government, they decided to include the nuclear energy as a partner to the renewable energies, it will be easier than previous government, directions, but still, it's never been, it's not going to be an easy problem at all. And it's the same to the UK and the other countries too. Looking at the Germany, they announced the carbon neutrality, and also they announced the phase out of nuclear energy. But they're now trying to restart the coal power plant because of energy security issues. So they're very difficult issues. But we have to go that way. There is no way other than that.
Right. And back on the nuclear issue, nuclear energy, Zeon, has a very long history over in the UK. I understand that the first commercial electricity from nuclear energy was produced there in the UK. Could you tell us a bit about their ventures?
That's correct. Yes, it was originally created here. We have a very proud legacy of scientists and atomic energy over here. It's sort of ironic that we've been against building it for so long, but that's really shifted in all of our major parties now support building more nuclear energy. But just on the point of Germany, that is a very interesting case study, because what they did was phase out their nuclear power plants. They said, we're going to be net zero, we're going to get rid of coal, and we're going to just build lots of renewables. And they spent billions and billions of euros building lots of renewables. And what happened is they had no baseload power. They'd shut down their nuclear power plants. So now they're firing up coal. And then the Ukrainian invasion happened, the invasion of Ukraine happened. And they realized and the whole world has realized they're so heavily dependent on fossil fuels, all the different fossil fuels, gas, coal, oil from Russia. And now they're desperately trying to wean off. And they actually got 60% increase of electricity costs to the consumer. So Germans are really struggling. They're worrying about winter. They're actually running out of wood to burn. That's how bad it is there at the moment. And even Ukraine has stepped in and said that they will supply them with nuclear energy because they have a clean, reliable supply. So it's really ironic. But at the moment, all pressure is on Germany to reopen their nuclear power plants because 3 of them are still functioning and they're in the process of being decommissioned. But there was a report that said they could still be reopened, but they still aren't doing it. So it's really interesting to see how the legacy of nuclear is in different countries, that there's a country that's really against nuclear and you can see what's happened as the result of that. And there's other countries like France, which has really good energy security, very pro-nuclear, and now UK, which is trying to follow in the footsteps of France by building more reactors.
Right, I see. All right, Zeon, thank you so much for shedding light on that. And Professor Chung here in the studio, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Yep.